Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today we are having a Geek Special episode, continuation or finishing, I guess, for now, of the series on salvaging 18650 lithium-ion cells. And in this episode, I'll show you a summary of my inventory, like how the cells turned out to be, and probably more interesting stuff to look at some charging scenarios like that. Like what do they mean? Like what are the good cells? What are not good cells? What are the cases that where you want to throw these cells out because they're not good anymore. All right, but this episode is going to be a lot of numbers, spreadsheets, and charts, so you have been warned. With that, let's get started. All right, so very quickly, let me walk you through the initial part of the inventory system that I have here in the spreadsheet. So each cell has an ID, what I did write down on the body. I did look up as far as I could find based on the markings and things like that. The cell type, which is basically manufactured in the model. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of different ones: Panasonic, Sanyo, ATL, Unison, some Chinese batteries, some model numbers. There are lots of different ones even from the same manufacturer. They are all 18650, at least in this one. Chemistry, again, all lithium-ion batteries. Nominal capacity, that's again something that I looked up based on the model. And that's an important number because based on that, actually, I did select charging, and also, I tried to find out how good the end result is compared to the original, new, as good as new battery. Well, the date and I was doing the charging. And then that sort of like, that's the interesting part starting coming in. So V0, so that's the initial voltage of the battery. So before I did anything, after I disassembled everything, what was the voltage on this particular cell? And as you can see, there's a wide variety of numbers here. So again, the nominal capacity, or I should say maximum capacity for, not capacity, the voltage for lithium ion, the ones that are not high voltage ones, is 4.2 volts. So it shouldn't be higher than that, and usually it's less than that. So nominal is about 4, maybe a bit high if it's fully charged. I think it goes down to about 3.6 normally. Anything below that, that's deeply discharged and things like that. So as you can see here, 3.62 for instance, well, that's a good working voltage for the lithium battery, except that it's pretty discharged, so, but that's fine. Now the next few are, well, that's 0.14, 0.09, 0.13. These are basically dead batteries. No charger will take them, well, as is. And that's where the next column comes in, bump. So did I have to do the bump, which is basically quickly connecting additional source of voltage to trick the, well, it's not necessarily tricking the charger, to make sure that actually we have minimal working voltage on the cell from which the charger can actually pick up the regular charging. And the charger that I used have different modes. So basically, starting from 3 volts and upwards, it's the regular charge. So whatever you specify from the charging cycle, it's going to do it. It considers this battery, well, the cells, to be fine as is, so it follows your direction. Then there's a pre-charging, when the batteries are actually pretty deeply discharged. Many chargers, regular chargers, would not touch them, fail to charge them. But this charger is good in a way that it can take, I think 1.8 or 1.7, somewhere there. I don't remember exactly the cutoff. So very deeply discharged, well, officially, but it can take it from there, do the pre-charge cycle, and that means going very low amperage, like 0.15 amps, no matter what your specified charging cycle is, and trying to bring it all the way to 3 volts, from which on it will switch to the regular charging cycle. And I'll show you in the charts how things look like if you record all this data. So anyway, so bump is something, as I said, did I have to do something special outside of the charger to initiate the charging? So basically all the cells I managed to, well, at least start some charging. Most of them did finish charging, not all of them. Okay, anyway, so that's the bump. So the ones that started with 3.62 did not need any bump. This one did need bump because that's way too low. Then we have some batteries that had absolutely zero, did not register anything. Then we had these batteries that were almost there, but not quite, 1.6, something like that, still did not quite meet the charger requirements. And so on and so forth. So again, like we can look at 366, so these ones were fine, 2 point something, again, the charger would take them into the pre-charger cycle, so I didn't need to bump it. Then again, the fairly discharged ones, some really dead ones at zeros, and so on and so forth. I think what's the highest? 3.9. These are actually pretty much, well, not fully charged, obviously, but I'd say at least halfway in. So despite this being a salvage cells, that's pretty good. Like 3.9, 3.8, 3.8 here again. Then a whole bunch of, again, dead cells, 3 point something. Basically, if you see 3 point something voltage initially without doing anything, that's already a good sign. There's a good chance that the cell is going to be at least decent. And even if it's on 2 something, that's a good chance it's going to go all right. If you see completely zero or very, very low numbers, 0.23, you can try it and you will see in the numbers here. You may get something out of that, but usually these are very, very poor outcomes, let's put it like that. Okay, so that's the initial voltage, the bump column. Okay, and that's the data for the initial charge attempt. So that's the charging amperage. So I charged all of them at 0.5 amps. And remember, this is a regular charging, which only kicks in starting from 3 volts. The termination voltage, again, all of them are 4.2. That's the standard lithium batteries. They all terminate at 4.2 volts. Yeah, you don't need to, well, that's a discharge amperage. So again, just a reminder, the charging, what I did was actually not just a simple charge, it was charge, discharge, charge cycle, so refresh, where we charged all the way to 4.2 volts, then discharge, and that's what it shows here at 0.85 amps, all the way down to 3 volts. And the discharge is the same for, I believe, all the cells that I use. So again, don't need to pay too much attention to that. And once it falls down back to 3 volts, then we charge back again at the original, well, 0.5 all the way to 4.2 volts. All right. The charger allows to specify thermal cutoff. So basically it measures the temperature of individual cells. And if it exceeds the specified number, which I think in all cases I specified as 45 degrees Celsius, it will stop the charging cycle. That usually means, well, it pretty much means that the cell is not good. The internal resistance is too high, and yeah, that's not a good cell. It could be a dangerous cell as well. So this feature is pretty important in a good charger because again, the lithium batteries could be dangerous, and that's exactly the kind of scenarios that you don't want to see. You're pumping in the amperage into the damaged cell without actually trying to see what the temperatures are, what the process is following in terms of voltages and amperages. And it's not difficult to, overcharge the lithium cell, and it can lead to fires, even potential explosions, as we may have all seen. And that's not good. We don't want that. So again, here we have a 45 degrees as a thermal cutoff. The room temperature that I was doing the charging was about 20, 21, 22, somewhere there. So, and here was the results of the initial charge. So T1 would be the maximum reached temperature for the cell. And again, you can see numbers from 27 all the way to thermal cutoff to 45, but most of them would go to low 30s. And that's that. So again, good cells would not even necessarily reach the 30s. They would just increase a few degrees in temperature, and that's that. And V1 would be the final voltage after it sits for a little bit, because they will all, well, assuming the charging actually did terminate, they will all reach 4.2 volts as specified here. However, the voltage usually drops very quickly from 4.2. If it's a good cell, it will just go 4.19, 4.18, very, very little drop off, but some of them would actually drop quite a bit, and that's again an indication of pretty bad cell. The high self-discharge, you shouldn't be seeing that at that short time horizon, like almost at all. R1, again, after the initial charge, the measurement of internal resistance, this one is pretty sketchy. It's not super reliable. I mean, the way how it was measured in the charger, it's not very reliable way of measuring the internal resistance, which is fine. Again, you will see that generally speaking, it's consistent with other indicators wherever the cell is good or bad. If the cell is bad, as of per other parameters, it usually will show high internal resistance, and if a cell is good, like this one, it will show reasonably low internal resistance. C1, that's the discharge capacity that the refresh cycle will generate. So basically not how much we pumped into the battery, but how much we actually were able to extract it on the discharge cycle. And that's in milliamps. Again, that's the charger who's telling me what the number is. And C1 percentage is basically what is the percentage what is measured capacity versus the nominal capacity that I took from the spreadsheet. Not the spreadsheet, but from the specs. Again, it's not exact science because my discharge cycle is not definitely not the same as the discharge cycles that they would measure nominal capacity at, but it's a good indication of how far off the battery is from, well, good. Well, the good would be 100%. As you can see, some of them show amazing results, like 98%, 99%. Well, that's great cell. Even in the 90s, it's still pretty good cell, considering that even the measurements are not necessarily accurate, but still decent. Once it gets into the 80s, 70s, like, okay, it's clearly not as good as new, but may still be useful for certain projects. And then you see some of the cases, then, yeah, like 9% is definitely wrong. Like below 50 and things like that. These are generally speaking bad cells. And there are other indications that that's not even necessarily real capacity. So you just need to get rid of those cells. So we'll talk a little bit more about the bad scenario, so to speak. And the status one is basically, well, is it good? And by good, it doesn't mean excellent. That means it's decent, working. Or if there's something else like internal short, for instance, here, if it's a heater, yeah, heat cap limit, basically some poor, blah, blah, blah. Again, I'll talk what's wrong with these cells that were actually bad. Some notes, blah, blah, blah. Again, there was actually more than one cycle. So that's the initial step for the initial charge-discharge cycle. What you want to do, generally speaking, again, if you have time and you can do that, You want to repeat this exercise several days later, like a week or 10 days. In my case, I aim for 10 days roughly. And you want to measure a couple of things. One is just what is the voltage after purely storing the cell after, well, 10 days in this case. So that's V2. So you would expect some self-discharge, even though it's not connected to anything. That's normal. How far it discharges, however, that's a separate story, and that's why we measure the voltage and how much is the percentage of this voltage with respect to 4.2, which is technically our maximum charge capacity. So if you see things after 10 days, 415, 412, that's like 99, 98% of the full voltage of the lithium cell. That's pretty decent. Again, you want to see as low discharge as possible, but these are decent numbers. So anything above 4.10, I'd say, is okay. Now you would see some of them, like this one, for instance, at 405. Okay, even though it looks like 96% is still pretty decent, but actually that's a pretty significant self-discharge over 10 days. That's generally speaking not a good sign. While you may use this battery again, like in some limited capacity, usually not as a battery per se, but just like an immediate source of power, not something you expect to be stored for a while. Like I used it for some of them, like the booster cells, things like that. Yeah, these are not good. 4 or 5, not great. But a lot of them, as you can see, are in this 4.10 and above category, outside of the ones that were already thrown out. And you can see the ones that were already marked as really bad. Yeah, you can see basically there's nothing left. So this is the pretty much base capacity voltage of the lithium battery at 3 point something, 3.5. So basically in 10 days, they went from 4.2 that they did reach, apparently, originally, all the way down to 3.5, which is completely fully empty. Okay. Yeah, again, like seeing 4.0, that's not great. These are not great cells. And these are marked as HSD, meaning high self-discharge. These are, generally speaking, not good cells. Sort them out. Ideally, don't use them. Yeah, you see some of them went down to 0.56, so that's just something is wrong with the cell, like completely wrong. That shouldn't go this way. And that didn't look too bad in the initial charge. So that's one of the reasons why it's good to check a few days later, like what's the status of these cells again. But again, like for most of them, if they were fine in the initial charge, they are fine after 10 days. Another 10 days, so like after 20 days after initial charge, that was more for consistency, that more for for the video, for the data. That's probably excessive. Like you don't, I mean, if you can, you just want to make sure that the results are consistent. And here I'm just measuring effectively how much is the voltage on this third time point, which is 20 days after initial charge, comparing to the second time point, which is 10 days later. And you see most of them are basically keeping exactly the same voltage, so they're not deteriorating more so than in the initial touch point after 10 days. Yeah, they still pretty much all of them having exactly the same, except the ones that were already bad. Well, they did deteriorate even more. So yeah, so that's, again, basically looking at those numbers, you can tell that the third touch point here after 20 days is probably not needed because it doesn't tell you anything what you haven't seen after the first one. This, well, 1 week or 10-day time horizon, but this one does filter out some of the bad cells that you may not notice, well, the fact that they're bad after the initial charge discharge. All right. And so that's generally the inventory. And last but not least, after our final touch point at like plus 20 days here, you can see here the storage voltage. Basically, around the discharge cycle, well, there's a specific cycle for that in the charger called storage mode. Basically, all it does, it discharges, in fact, the cells down to 3.8, and that's considered to be the appropriate voltage for storing, for longer term storage of lithium batteries, because you don't want to store them fully charged, because they discharge quickly. There's a potential hazards, well, more so I guess than usual. You don't just want to store them completely discharged, because again, like dropping below minimum voltage, they will self-discharge a little bit even at the lowest voltages. You don't want that either. So 3.8 is actually at about 50% of charged capacity, and that's considered to be a good long-term storage setup for keeping your batteries in safe manner in the storage. And that's that. So basically I did it right away, and that's where they are right now. All right, and in the next episode, I think it's getting kind of long, we'll take a look at the different charging profiles for individual cells, what the good charging profile looks like, and what are the bad scenarios look like, whatever it's the heating up too much, overcharging beyond maximum capacity, just dead cells, not quite reaching the maximum, the target voltage and things like that. Basically, delving more in depth of the individual cell charging profiles and what's good, what's bad. And with that, if you like this video, please click that like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and yeah, write something in the comments whether you liked it, want to do something like that, have any questions. I would be happy to answer if I can. And if you have any additional information, like put it out there, so again, other people who will be watching this video and checking the comments can benefit as well, myself included. And with that, I'll see you next time. See ya.